Welcome to Mystery Cafe, your ultimate stop for gripping detective stories, chilling mysteries, and unforgettable investigations. Here, every video serves a fresh dose of suspense, shocking twists, and cases that challenge your inner detective. From classic whodunits to modern crime stories, we bring the world of mystery straight to your screen, where every clue matters and no secret stays buried for long. Before we start unraveling today's mystery, we'd love to know, where are you watching from? Globe showing Europe, Africa. Drop your country, city, or stay in the comments, and let's see how far the Mystery Cafe family reaches. Magnifying glass tilted right.
The Secrets of the Stolen Collection. Chapter 1. A Mysterious Invitation. The afternoon rain had begun to fall steadily when a delivery arrived at the brownstone on West 35th Street, marking the beginning of a new mystery. Nero Wolfe, renowned detective and lover of fine food, flowers and solitude, was in his study as usual with his large frame comfortably nestled in his armchair. He was enjoying a rare moment of peace, his thoughts drifting to orchids and a recent case he'd closed with minimal effort. After all, it had been a rather mundane affair involving a missing person and an overly enthusiastic nephew, both of whom had been quickly found, thanks to his usual investigative brilliance. But as the doorbell rang and his assistant Archie Goodwin entered the room holding an envelope, Wolfe's easy demeanour shifted. Wolfe raised an eyebrow and turned his head slightly toward Archie, a signal that he was paying attention. Archie handed him the envelope and Wolfe noted the lack of a return address and the elegant cursive writing on the front, Nero Wolfe, Detective. The paper was thick and creamy, suggesting someone of considerable wealth or importance. "Who's it from, Archie?" Wolfe asked, not moving from his chair, his voice as calm as ever. "Don't know yet," Archie replied with a smirk. "But it looks fancy. Judging by the size of it, it's not a bill. Maybe we're getting an invitation to an exclusive dinner party." Wolfe didn't respond immediately, his fingers brushing the edge of the envelope as he studied it. There was something about this letter that struck him, a subtle but unmistakable feeling that something significant was about to unfold. Without wasting another moment, he tore open the envelope with his usual efficiency. The letter inside was brief, but its message was clear. Wolfe's sharp eyes scanned it, and as he read, his face grew more focused. He handed the letter to Archie, who read it aloud. "Dear Mr. Wolfe, I require your services immediately. My name is Juliette Verdon, and I am a renowned concert pianist. Someone has stolen a valuable item from me, and I believe the theft is tied to my upcoming performance at Carnegie Hall. I am being threatened, and I fear that more may be stolen, or even worse, that something may happen to me. Please meet me at your earliest convenience. I will be waiting for you at the Claremont Hotel at precisely 6 p.m. tomorrow. Yours, sincerely, Juliette Verdon." Archie glanced up from the letter. "A concert pianist? Sounds like an odd case, Wolfe. You sure you want to dive into this one?" Wolfe, still sitting motionless, didn't respond immediately. His mind was already at work, piecing together the possible connections. Theft, threats, a high-profile performance at Carnegie Hall. Wolfe's sharp intuition told him that there was more to this than just a stolen object. "No, Archie," Wolfe said slowly, his deep voice calm but filled with the weight of his thoughts. "This is no ordinary case. A concert pianist is not likely to be the target of some petty thief. And the timing is too precise. There is a connection here, something deeper than a mere robbery." Wolfe reached for his magnifying glass, twirling it in his hand as he considered the possibilities. "The name, Juliette Verdon, is one I recognize. She is well known in the world of classical music, a woman of talent, reputation, and, if I'm not mistaken, a certain circle of acquaintances that we may need to take into account. Archie raised an eyebrow. "You're saying this isn't a run-of-the-mill theft? You think it's connected to something bigger?" Wolfe nodded, his expression unchanged. "Indeed, the theft of an item from a woman of Juliette Verdon's stature is only the surface. I suspect this case involves more than just stolen property. It involves something much more significant. And tomorrow, at 6 p.m., we will find out exactly what." With that, Wolfe stood from his chair and walked to his desk, where a variety of case files were neatly stacked. He picked up a case file from the top, flipping through its contents with the precision only someone like Wolfe could manage. He didn't glance up as he spoke again. "Archie, arrange for a car to take us to the Claremont Hotel tomorrow. We shall meet Miss Verdon at the designated time." "You got it, boss," Archie said, folding the letter and tucking it into his pocket. "I'll make the arrangements. But just out of curiosity, what do you think is going on here? Theft? A concert? Threats? It's a lot to put together." Wolfe paused for a moment, his fingers lightly tapping the desk. "I suspect that the theft is not merely about the object itself, Archie. It's about sending a message. Whoever is behind this wants Miss Verdon to know that they can strike at her most vulnerable moment. This is not about material gain, it's a warning, and I suspect that we'll soon learn why she was chosen as the target." Archie, ever the skeptic, raised an eyebrow, but didn't press further. He knew that Wolfe had a habit of seeing things others missed. The great detective had a gift for noticing the smallest details, a skill that had earned him both admiration and fear from those who crossed his path. The next day, as the clock struck 5:30 p.m., Wolfe and Archie stood outside the Claremont Hotel in Manhattan. The evening was cool, the sky overcast, and the streets bustling with people heading to their evening appointments. Archie glanced at his watch and then at Wolfe, who seemed as composed as ever, his usual air of calm confidence firmly in place. "I'll admit," Archie said with a grin, "you do make waiting around look effortless. Me, I'm itching to see what's going on with this Juliette Verdon. Something tells me this isn't just about missing jewelry." Wolfe didn't respond, his eyes scanning the entrance to the hotel. "Patience, Archie. Miss Verdon has made it clear that she requires our assistance. We'll find out what is really going on soon enough." They were greeted by a hotel employee who led them up to a private suite on the second floor. The room was elegantly furnished, and sitting near the window with a glass of water in hand was Juliette Verdon herself. She rose when she saw Wolfe and Archie enter, her sharp features framed by dark hair, and her poised demeanor immediately commanding attention. "Mr. Wolfe," she said, her voice tinged with both relief and anxiety. "Thank you for coming. I didn't know where else to turn." Wolfe nodded slightly, his eyes analyzing her every move. "Ms. Verdon, you mentioned theft and threats. Start from the beginning. Tell me what happened." Juliette hesitated for a moment, her hands trembling slightly as she placed the glass down on the nearby table. "It started this morning. I woke up to find that a valuable necklace, one passed down from my mother, was missing from my dressing room. At first, I thought I had misplaced it. But then I found a note. A warning." She handed Wolfe the note, and he read it carefully. The handwriting was elegant but firm, the words clear and menacing. "Don't perform at Carnegie Hall or you will regret it. Your time is running out." Wolfe's expression remained unchanged, but his eyes grew sharper. "And this was the only note?" Juliette nodded, her gaze flickering nervously. "Yes, but it was the tone, the certainty of it that frightened me. It wasn't just a warning, it felt like a threat, something more dangerous." Wolfe glanced at Archie, who gave him a subtle nod. They had their first clue, but the mystery was only beginning. "I see," Wolfe said, standing and turning toward the window. You've come to the right place, Ms. Verdon. We'll find the person behind this, and I suspect there's much more at stake than a missing necklace. Chapter 2. The Clue in the Music. The room was filled with a soft hum of city sounds drifting in from the streets below. Juliette Verdon sat across from Nero Wolfe, her hands folded tightly in her lap, as she anxiously waited for his next move. Wolfe had already reviewed the threatening note, the missing necklace, and the entire situation. His mind was working, slowly piecing together the puzzle. But for the moment, he said nothing. His focus remained on the case, not on the woman who had come to him for help. Across from her, Archie Goodwin sat with his usual casual air, tapping a pen against the edge of his notepad. He looked at Wolfe, then at Juliette, then back to Wolfe, but said nothing. He had long learned that Nero Wolfe did not like to be rushed. Whatever thoughts the great detective was processing, Archie knew he would have to wait for them to materialize at their own pace. Juliette shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable with the silence. She was a woman used to being the center of attention, on stage, in concert halls and at parties, but here, in Wolfe's office, her nerves betrayed her. She had been the center of an unfolding mystery, but now, in the presence of Wolfe's unwavering calm, she seemed almost out of place. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Wolfe broke the silence. He had stopped looking at Juliette and instead turned his gaze toward the window, where the grey clouds of an early evening had begun to loom ominously over the city. "Miss Verdon," Wolfe began, his voice as measured as ever. "You are certain that the necklace was in your dressing room this morning?" Juliette nodded quickly, her expression earnest. "Yes. I have never misplaced it. It's too precious to me. It was the last gift from my mother before she passed. I've kept it in my dressing room, always safe, always locked away in the small drawer in the vanity." Wolfe's eyes flicked back to her, piercing and calculating. "And you are also certain that no one entered your dressing room except for you?" Juliette hesitated for a moment, then answered, "I'm sure. The staff knew I would be rehearsing, and I made sure the room was secure. No one came in, but when I returned, the necklace was gone." "And you found the note at the same time?" Wolfe asked. "No," she replied, shaking her head. "The note came later. I was practicing in the main hall, and when I returned to my dressing room, I found it on the vanity. It was the only thing out of place. The necklace was gone. And there was this warning." Wolfe took the note again and studied it carefully. His fingers traced the paper as if he were feeling for hidden meaning in the fibers of the document itself. "This note is most curious," he said, almost to himself. "The handwriting is deliberate, but it is not rushed. Whoever wrote this took their time." He paused for a moment, then looked up. "The message is clear enough, but it is the nature of the threat that interests me. Whoever is behind this is not concerned with theft alone. They want to make an example of you, Ms. Verdon. You are a performer, someone whose reputation precedes you. The threat is not just about the loss of an object, it is about control. Whoever did this intends to ruin your performance." Juliette's breath hitched in her throat. "But why? Why me? I don't have any enemies, Mr. Wolfe. I've worked for years to build my reputation as a musician. I've performed at some of the most prestigious venues in the world. I've never been involved in anything shady." Wolfe nodded, understanding her confusion, but he wasn't ready to offer comfort just yet. "It's often the most successful who attract attention, Ms. Verdon. You are at the top of your field. You play in the most celebrated concert halls, and your name is recognized by those who know music and those who don't. You are the person people look up to. That makes you a target." Emily's voice was quiet, but filled with concern. "But why now?" Why this particular performance? Wolfe turned his gaze toward her, his expression softening just a fraction. That's the question, isn't it? Why wait until now? There's something about this upcoming performance, something significant. The timing is too precise. I don't understand, Juliette said, her voice cracking slightly. I was simply invited to perform. It's a great honor, but I don't know of any specific reason why someone would target me now. Why would someone want to sabotage my career like this? Wolfe sat back in his chair, steepling his fingers together as he thought for a moment. There is something about the performance at Carnegie Hall that makes it special, Miss Verdon, but the answer is not in the performance itself. It is in the audience. He paused, letting his words sink in. The necklace was not taken to cause you personal loss, but rather to create an opening for someone to take something more valuable from you, your peace of mind. This theft, this threat, is just the beginning. Whoever is behind this will likely strike again. Emily, who had been silent up until now, looked up with concern. Do you think the person who stole the necklace will do something during the performance? You said the audience was the key. Wolfe nodded slowly, his sharp eyes focused on Juliette. I believe the performance is a ruse, a carefully orchestrated event designed to draw people together. Someone plans to make a move during the concert, but they want you to feel the pressure first. They want to see you cracked under the weight of your fear. Juliette looked between Wolfe and Archie, her eyes wide with realization. You think they're planning something at the concert itself? Wolfe did not reply immediately. He simply stood up and walked to the window, gazing out at the rain, deep in thought. He had always been a man of few words, and in his quiet moments, his mind would work at a speed that was almost unsettling. After a few moments, he turned and looked back at Juliette. I think you are in danger, Miss Verdon, but not in the way you expect. You are being tested. Whoever is behind this intends to manipulate you, to break you down before they make their final move. Your next performance is the key. Juliette swallowed hard, the weight of Wolfe's words settling on her shoulders. What should I do? Wolfe walked over to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a small notebook. I will need you to trust me, Miss Verdon. We will begin by securing your performance, keeping an eye on your rivals, your fellow performers, and most importantly, anyone with an interest in seeing you fail. He turned to Archie, who had been listening intently. Archie, I'll need you to attend the performance at Carnegie Hall. Keep your distance from the stage, but stay close enough to observe. I suspect the theft of the necklace was merely the first act. The real show will happen under the spotlight. Juliette nodded, her fear now mixing with determination. I'll do whatever you say, Mr. Wolfe. I just want this nightmare to end. I assure you, Wolfe said with quiet confidence, it will, but be prepared. The game is only beginning. Chapter 3. The stage is set. The night of Juliette Verdon's performance at Carnegie Hall arrived, and the air was thick with anticipation. The concert hall, with its grand architecture and sweeping balconies, was packed with an audience eager to see the renowned concert pianist perform. The stage was set with the grand piano at its center, bathed in soft lighting that cast long shadows across the polished wood. The atmosphere was electric, the hushed whispers of the crowd punctuated by the occasional soft cough or shuffle of feet. But beneath the glamorous facade of the event, there was tension, an undercurrent that could be felt by anyone paying close attention. Nero Wolfe, though he did not normally indulge in the grand social spectacles of the city, had decided that he would attend tonight's performance in person. His usual disdain for crowds and unnecessary socializing had taken a back seat to the case at hand. The theft of the necklace the threats against Juliette Verdon, and the shadowy figure behind it all had left Wolfe with no other option. This performance was the stage on which everything would unfold, and he was determined to be there to see it. "I've got my eyes on everything," Archie Goodwin said, his voice filled with a touch of excitement, though he tried to hide it. He'd never been to Carnegie Hall before, and while he could tell that Wolfe was focused on the case, Archie couldn't help but be drawn in by the grandeur of the evening. "I'll be in the audience, watching the show, and anyone who looks suspicious." Wolfe gave him a look that could be described as patient but only just. "Do not get involved, Archie. If anything happens, it is imperative that we remain discreet. If we act too quickly, we risk alarming our mystery guest." Archie grinned, clearly eager to dive into the action. "I get it. Don't make a scene, but you know I can't resist a little bit of action." Wolfe's gaze didn't waver from the stage. "There will be no need for action, Archie. The most dangerous thing we could do now is make ourselves known. If we show ourselves too early, we could cause more harm than good." As the lights dimmed in the hall, signaling the start of the performance, Wolfe settled into his seat, his large form oddly inconspicuous in the plush velvet chairs. Archie, however, couldn't help but fidget in his seat, adjusting himself every few moments. His eyes scanned the audience, checking for anyone who seemed out of place, anyone who might be hiding a secret, anyone who could be involved in the scheme that had already caused so much turmoil for Juliette Verdon. The spotlight hit the grand piano, and there she was, Juliette Verdon, stepping onto the stage with grace and poise. Her dark hair was swept up elegantly, and she wore a gown of deep emerald that shimmered under the lights. As she walked to the piano, her steps were confident, but there was a tightness in her posture that Wolfe immediately recognized. She was under pressure. Her fingers, though steady as they adjusted to the piano's keys, betrayed the slightest tremor. Jessica's gaze narrowed as he observed her closely, noting how the elegance of her performance could not entirely mask the wariness behind her eyes. She was here to play, but she was also here to confront the fear that had been building inside her for days. The first notes echoed across the hall, a beautiful, almost haunting melody. Juliette's fingers danced over the keys, each note flowing with precision, filling the air with music. But Wolfe knew better. He was focused not on the music itself, but on the environment, the people around them. If something were to happen, it would happen now. As the performance progressed, the audience was enraptured by Juliette's skill. Wolfe could feel the tension in the room, and not just from the obvious anxiety surrounding Juliette. There were too many eyes in the audience, too many people who might have motives, hidden agendas that extended beyond the music. Wolfe's eyes moved around the room, settling on several key individuals. There was an older man near the front who looked out of place among the younger, more affluent patrons. He was too rigid in his seat, his gaze locked onto the stage with unnerving intensity. Then there was a woman, seated in the balcony, who seemed distracted, constantly adjusting her glasses and scanning the room. Archie, sitting in the back of the hall, had his eyes on a few individuals as well. His instincts told him that something was about to happen, but there was no obvious sign of immediate danger. Everything was too polished, too smooth. But Archie had learned the hard way that appearances could be deceiving. Wolfe's prediction had been accurate. Things were happening behind the scenes, and their job was to stay alert. Juliette's music swelled into a crescendo, and just as the final notes reverberated through the hall, Wolfe's sharp hearing picked up a faint, almost imperceptible sound, a whisper among the audience, a hushed tone of conversation. It was then that he saw it. A figure moved from the shadows at the edge of the stage, slipping between the thick velvet curtains that hung at the back. Wolfe's eyes locked onto the man, and his heart quickened just a fraction. He had expected something to happen, but he hadn't expected it to be so sudden. The man was tall, with a dark suit that blended well with the surrounding shadows. He seemed to be waiting for the perfect moment. The way he moved, almost gliding silently across the floor, made Wolfe's suspicions grow stronger. The moment Juliette finished her final piece, the audience erupted into applause. Wolfe, however, did not join in. His attention was focused entirely on the figure who had now moved to the side of the stage. Wolfe knew that whatever was about to unfold had nothing to do with music. It was all about power, control, and the people who had been pulling the strings from the shadows. "Archie," Wolfe murmured softly, not taking his eyes off the man. "Follow that figure. Do not confront him, but stay out of sight. I suspect we are about to learn something significant." Archie hesitated only a moment before nodding. He slipped out of his seat and began to make his way toward the aisle, keeping his head low and his movements casual. Wolfe stayed put, his eyes still focused on the unfolding scene before him. He had been in situations like this before, where everything on the surface appeared to be normal, yet there was something off. He knew that every player in this drama had a role to play, and tonight he was going to uncover who was pulling the strings. Juliette, unaware of the danger looming around her, was taking her bows at the front of the stage, but Wolfe's gaze was on the man moving toward the backstage area. He could sense the tension building in the air, and he knew they were close to uncovering the truth behind the threats and the missing necklace. Tonight would be the turning point in the case. And Nero Wolfe was determined to be the one who brought it all to light. Chapter 4. The Shadow Behind the Curtain. The applause that followed Juliette Verdon's final performance echoed in the grand hall, but it felt hollow to Nero Wolfe. Despite the accolades from the audience, Wolfe's attention remained locked on the man he had seen slip backstage. That figure, elusive yet purposeful, had drawn Wolfe's suspicions the moment he had emerged from the shadows. The timing had been too perfect. The man had appeared right after the final notes of the performance, just as Wolfe had anticipated something would. Archie had already slipped into the crowd, making his way toward the backstage area, but Wolfe knew it was not enough just to watch from afar. He needed to know who this man was, and why he had chosen this moment to move. There was something more at play here, something much larger than a mere stolen necklace or a threat to Juliette. As the evening wore on, Wolfe's mind shifted to what they hadn't yet seen, the deeper layers of this mystery. He stood from his seat, careful not to draw attention to himself. The audience was still captivated, and he moved swiftly toward the back, unnoticed. Wolfe's large frame maneuvered through the corridors of Carnegie Hall with the practiced ease of someone who had spent a lifetime observing the world without becoming a part of it. His steps were deliberate, purposeful. He was keenly aware of the importance of the next moments. He needed to find out exactly who had been behind the curtain and what role they played in the larger puzzle. He reached the backstage area where the stagehands were still cleaning up, preparing for the next performance. Wolfe's presence in this part of the hall was nothing unusual. He was, after all, a well-known figure in New York, and many respected him for his intellect. But tonight, there was no time for pleasantries, no time for small talk. He moved past the crew members with a quick nod, his sharp eyes scanning the area for any sign of movement. In the shadows near the stage door, Wolfe saw Archie, who was now standing beside a tall man in a dark suit. It was the same figure from earlier. Wolfe couldn't help but notice how Archie, normally brash and outgoing, was standing in an unusually restrained posture. He had made sure not to approach the man directly, but his body language spoke volumes. It was a silent acknowledgement between them that they had found something worth investigating. "Archie," Wolfe called out softly, his voice cutting through the low murmurs of backstage activity. Archie immediately turned, and a flicker of recognition passed between them. Without a word, Wolfe stepped toward the man in the suit, his gaze fixed and intense. The man looked up, his face briefly illuminated by the dim light of the backstage area. He had sharp features, dark hair, and eyes that betrayed a subtle weariness. His appearance was immaculate, as if he had rehearsed it down to the finest detail. There was something unsettling about him, a coldness that emanated even in the midst of the bustling backstage environment. Wolfe regarded him for a moment, studying his every detail before speaking. "I believe you and I have something to discuss." The man smiled, but it was a thin, calculated smile. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about." Wolfe didn't flinch. "You were seen earlier moving through the audience and then slipping backstage. You appear to be in quite a hurry, and yet you seem to be very much at ease. Care to explain yourself?" The man's smile faltered just for a moment, but it quickly returned. "I'm just a fan of Ms. Verdon's work. I was waiting for the performance to end so I could congratulate her." Wolfe didn't buy it. "A fan, you say? And you were waiting where exactly? Because I'm certain the stage crew didn't see you in the wings." The man's posture shifted slightly. He was now standing just a little straighter, his expression becoming more guarded. Wolfe could feel the tension rising like a storm just before it broke. He was no stranger to the games people played, and this man was clearly playing one of his own. "I told you," the man said, his voice smooth, but with a hint of irritation. "I was waiting for Miss Verdon, just like anyone else would." Wolfe's gaze didn't waver, but he could sense that the man was hiding something. His intuition, honed by years of solving cases, told him that this man had more to do with the case than he was letting on. The necklace, the threats, and the mysterious figure in the shadows, it all seemed too neatly arranged. At that moment, Archie, who had been standing silently, spoke up. "This isn't just about a fan. Wolfe's been in this game long enough to know when someone's hiding something. You're not who you say you are." The man's expression changed slightly, but the facade never fully cracked. "I don't have to explain myself to either of you," he said, his tone becoming sharper. "I think you should both leave." Wolfe considered the man's words for a moment. His instincts told him that there was something more beneath the surface. Whoever this man was, he was involved in something much bigger than just being a fan of Juliette Verdon. "I think," Wolfe said slowly, his voice carrying a tone that brooked no argument, "that you will explain yourself. To me, or to someone else. But I assure you, one way or another, the truth will come to light." The man's eyes flickered with something like frustration, but it quickly passed. He straightened his suit jacket and took a deep breath, as if preparing for something. "You don't know who you're dealing with, Mr. Wolfe. This isn't something you want to be involved in." Wolfe didn't react immediately. He simply studied the man, his gaze unwavering. "I've been involved in far worse situations than this, my friend. But now, I believe it's time for you to tell me exactly why you've been lurking in the shadows tonight." There was a brief, tense silence, and then the man spoke. "You want to know what I'm involved in?" he asked, his voice suddenly quiet, but laced with an icy edge. "I'm the one who's been trying to stop Juliette from performing. I'm the one who's been threatening her, taking what I need and making sure that no one stands in the way." The words hung in the air, and Wolfe's mind began to piece the puzzle together. The man's arrogance, his calculated calm, it all pointed to one thing. This was no simple rivalry. This was a carefully orchestrated campaign to sabotage Juliette's career, and it was connected to far more than just a stolen necklace. Wolfe leaned in, his voice low and deliberate. "You're part of something much larger than you realize, and I suspect that your little scheme is about to come to a very abrupt end." The man's eyes hardened, and for the first time, Wolfe saw a flicker of fear beneath the cold exterior. He had spoken too much, and now he was trapped. The game was no longer about a stolen necklace or a threat to Juliette Verdon's performance. It was about uncovering the truth, the dark secrets that had been carefully hidden for too long. Wolfe stood up straight and glanced at Archie, signaling for him to move in. "We've only just begun, my friend, and you're about to wish you'd never crossed paths with Juliette Verdon." Chapter 5. Unmasking the Web. The man's revelation that he had been orchestrating the sabotage of Juliette Verdon's career hung in the air like a thick fog. Nero Wolfe, ever the unflappable detective, didn't show any outward sign of surprise, but inside, his mind was working overtime. The pieces were falling into place, but there were still many questions left unanswered. Who was this man truly working for? And what was the larger game at play? "Who are you?" Wolfe asked, his voice cutting through the tension in the room like a knife. "And why did you choose Juliette Verdon as your target?" The man stood still for a moment, seemingly weighing his options. Wolfe knew that he was likely calculating the risks of talking, whether it was better to continue lying or to reveal his true intentions. The longer he hesitated, the more Wolfe's suspicions grew. Whoever this man was, he wasn't just a simple henchman or a disgruntled fan. There was something far more intricate at work. "I don't have to tell you anything," the man finally said, his voice betraying a hint of uncertainty. "You've been meddling where you don't belong. If you knew what I was really protecting, you wouldn't dare press further." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "I'm afraid you're mistaken. The moment you threatened Miss Verdon and involved her in your schemes, you made it my business." The man took a deep breath, then began to speak slowly, as if the weight of his next words was a burden he could no longer carry. "My name is Thomas Granger," he said, his voice now tinged with a resigned bitterness. "I am the head of a private art collection that's been in my family for generations. We have holdings that are worth millions, and I've worked my entire life to protect those assets." "Our collection," Archie echoed, standing nearby with a raised eyebrow. "I don't see how a piano performance fits into your portfolio." Granger gave Archie a sharp look. "It's not just about the art, Mr. Goodwin. It's about the connections, the people who control the flow of valuable pieces in the art world. It's a business where money and power are intertwined. You take the right piece of art, and you control access to an entire world of wealth. And Juliette, she's in the middle of it all." Wolfe leaned forward slightly, intrigued. "Explain." Granger looked around the backstage area, as though ensuring that no one else could hear his confession. "Juliette's mother, the late Elena Verdon, was a close associate of my family. She had access to pieces that no one else did, pieces that were never meant to be exposed to the public. The necklace that was stolen? It's not just a piece of jewelry. It's a key, a symbol of the alliance between the two families." Archie's eyebrows shot up. "A key to what?" "To a hidden collection," Granger replied, his voice lowering. "A private collection of art and artifacts that was meant to be kept off the grid. Too valuable to be shown, too dangerous to be revealed. My father made the mistake of trusting Elena with some of the most precious works we had. After she died, I was tasked with safeguarding them, making sure they didn't fall into the wrong hands." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "And Juliette knew about this collection?" Granger nodded slowly. She didn't know all the details, not at first. But when her mother died, Juliette found out more than she was meant to. She began asking questions, looking through her mother's papers, searching for answers. I knew I had to stop her before she uncovered the truth. "And the necklace?" Wolfe asked. Granger looked down at the floor, his shoulders slumping. It was meant to be a secret, a family heirloom that symbolized the alliance between our families. But when Juliette found it in her mother's belongings, I knew she would piece things together. I couldn't let that happen. I had to stop her from exposing everything. Wolfe's expression remained unchanged, but his mind was spinning. A stolen necklace, a hidden collection of priceless artifacts, and a woman who had unknowingly stumbled into a world of power and danger. It all made sense now in a way. Juliette was caught in a storm that had little to do with her talent as a pianist and everything to do with her inheritance. You wanted to keep the necklace from Juliette, not because it was valuable to her personally, but because of what it represented, Wolfe said, his tone a bit sharper now. You feared that if she realized the truth, she would expose the collection and the legacy behind it. Granger's eyes flickered with guilt. Yes, I didn't want to hurt her, but I had to protect what was mine. I had no choice. If people found out about the collection, there would be chaos. Criminals, collectors, governments all wanting a piece of it. I couldn't let that happen. Wolfe stood up, his gaze still locked on Granger. You've made a grave mistake, Granger. By threatening Juliette and causing this chaos, you've brought attention to something that should have stayed hidden. But it's not too late to stop this. The police need to be involved, and we will take the necessary steps to make sure this collection doesn't end up in the wrong hands. Granger looked desperate now, his voice rising slightly. No, you don't understand. I can't involve the police. I've already made deals with the wrong people, people who would destroy me and anyone connected to this collection. The truth about this collection will ruin everything. And yet, you've already ruined everything by trying to control it, Wolfe countered, his voice firm. Your attempts to threaten and intimidate Juliette have brought this matter into the light. You have no choice but to face the consequences. Granger's face twisted in frustration, but he knew Wolfe was right. The web he had spun, built on years of secrets, had unraveled in an instant. The consequences of his actions had now become inevitable. Then what do you propose I do? Granger asked, his voice quieter now, tinged with resignation. You will come with me, Wolfe said. We will present your case to the authorities. But if you truly care about protecting the collection, you will cooperate fully. You cannot hide from the truth any longer. Granger was silent for a long moment, his expression torn between fear and stubbornness. Finally, with a resigned sigh, he nodded. I'll go with you, but you have to promise me something, he said, his voice shaking. Promise me that Juliette will be safe. She doesn't deserve to be part of this. She was only ever a pawn in a game she didn't even know she was playing. Wolfe's gaze softened slightly. I promise you, Granger, Juliette will be safe. But the truth must come out, and it will. As Wolfe and Granger made their way toward the exit, Archie followed, glancing at Wolfe with a raised eyebrow. Well, Wolfe, you sure have a way with people. From concert pianists to art thieves, what's next? Wolfe didn't answer immediately. His mind was already working on the next phase of the case. There were still many unanswered questions. The collection, the people involved, the danger to Juliette. None of it was over yet. But one thing was clear. Wolfe had the answers in his hands, and he wasn't about to let anyone else control the narrative. The truth was finally coming to light, and nothing could stop it now. Chapter 6. The Price of Secrets. The next morning, The air was filled with tension as Nero Wolfe sat in his study, his large frame filling the space as he carefully considered the events of the previous night. Granger's confession had left him with more questions than answers, and while the pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, Wolfe knew there was more to uncover. He stared out the window, his mind sifting through the complex web of art, power, and deception that had led them to this point. "Archie!" Wolfe called out without turning his head, his voice as composed as ever. Archie, who had been perched on the arm of the chair nearby, raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, boss?" Wolfe's voice was laced with both irritation and curiosity. Granger's tale about his family's collection. It's too neat, too calculated. He's protecting something more than just art. He's protecting power, influence, and perhaps something much darker. He's made a deal with the wrong people, but I doubt it's the only deal he's made. Archie tilted his head, trying to keep up with Wolfe's rapid thinking. "So you're saying the whole thing's not just about a stolen necklace and a threatened pianist? There's more to it?" Wolfe nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing. "Much more. Granger has been playing a dangerous game, and Juliette Verdon stumbled into it. Her mother's connection to this collection is only the beginning. What I suspect now is that the necklace is just the first in a string of valuable pieces, artifacts, items of history, meant to be hidden and used as leverage." "So what now?" Archie asked, his voice sharp, with the same curiosity that Wolfe always elicited in him. "We confront Granger's associates," Wolfe said, his tone firm. "We need to understand who else is involved in this scheme. Someone, perhaps several someones, are in it for more than just the art. This is about control, and it's about keeping secrets." The morning passed with no further developments, but Wolfe's mind was constantly at work. He spent his time reviewing the names of art collectors, curators, and other individuals who had crossed paths with Granger's family over the years. Every name, every transaction, every piece of art was connected to something much larger than mere personal wealth. Wolfe wasn't just solving a theft, he was uncovering a conspiracy, a network of hidden deals and buried secrets. By late afternoon, Archie returned from his own investigations, having visited several galleries and museums that Granger and his family had been connected to. "Found a few interesting things," Archie said as he walked into the study, holding a stack of papers. Turns out, Granger's family didn't just collect art. They trafficked in rare artifacts, historical pieces that were meant to stay out of public sight. Some of them were smuggled into the country under fake paperwork. Wolfe took the papers from Archie, scanning through them with his sharp, practiced eye. "As I suspected," Wolfe muttered. Granger wasn't just protecting a collection of art. He was safeguarding a treasure trove of stolen history, artifacts that could change the course of historical research if they were made public. "And now Juliette is in the middle of it," Archie said, leaning against the desk. "She doesn't know what she's really stepped into." Wolfe nodded slowly, his expression contemplative. "Exactly. She has no idea how deeply she's involved. But that is what makes this so dangerous. If she were to expose the collection, the people who have been keeping these secrets would stop at nothing to ensure their past doesn't come to light." Archie's expression grew grim. "So, what's our next step?" Wolfe stood up, his gaze hardening with resolve. "We need to find the missing pieces, figuratively and literally. If we are going to protect Juliette, we need to uncover who is still pulling the strings behind this operation." Later that evening, Wolfe and Archie arrived at the latest clue, a small private auction house located in a nondescript building near the edge of the city. The auction house was known for dealing in rare items, but it wasn't on the radar of most people. Its reputation was one of discretion, and for that reason, it had become a favorite of collectors who didn't want their acquisitions to be scrutinized. Wolfe and Archie slipped through the back door, blending in with the crowd of potential buyers, all of whom were discussing various pieces of art and artifacts. Wolfe's eyes darted from person to person, his gaze flicking from one bidder to the next. The atmosphere was tense, no one spoke loudly, and conversations were kept to a hush. At the far end of the room, Wolfe spotted a familiar figure. It was Lillian Caldwell, the art curator, who had been associated with the Verdon family for years. She was standing with a man Wolfe didn't recognize, an older individual with a stern face and dark eyes. Wolfe's sharp intuition told him that this man was no ordinary bidder. He was someone with influence, someone who had a vested interest in keeping the secrets of the collection hidden. Archie followed Wolfe's gaze and immediately recognized Caldwell. "That's her," he whispered. "The curator, the one Juliette said might know something about the necklace." Wolfe nodded slowly. "She's not just a curator, Archie. She's more than that. She's an integral part of this network, and I suspect she knows exactly where the missing pieces are." Without another word, Wolfe started to move through the crowd, his large frame pushing through the whispers and murmurs of the other buyers. His eyes remained fixed on Caldwell, watching her every move. He was close enough now to hear snippets of her conversation with the older man. "Are you sure this is the last piece?" the man asked, in a low, gravelly voice. Caldwell's response was sharp, almost defensive. "It is. We've made the deal. Everything is in place. No one can trace it back to us." Wolfe's mind raced. They were talking about the collection, more specifically, the final piece. This was it. The key to everything. He had to get closer. As Wolfe moved in, his hand brushed against the shoulder of a nearby bidder, knocking over a stack of papers. The noise was enough to draw attention to him, but Wolfe didn't flinch. He moved quickly, using the momentary distraction to approach Caldwell and the man. "Miss Caldwell," Wolfe said smoothly, stepping into their line of sight. "A pleasure to see you again. I'm afraid I have a few questions." Caldwell's eyes widened for a split second, and the man beside her stiffened. Wolfe could see the recognition flicker in her eyes, but she quickly regained her composure. "Mr. Wolfe," she said, her voice calm but edged with something else. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I can't say the same for you, Miss Caldwell," Wolfe replied, his tone as cool as the evening air outside. "You see, I'm here because I believe you know exactly where the final piece of the collection is. The one that Juliette Verdon's mother left behind." Caldwell's expression tightened, and the man beside her made a subtle but threatening motion. Wolfe didn't flinch. "Let's take this conversation elsewhere," Wolfe suggested quietly, his gaze locking onto Caldwell's. "Before the auction starts in earnest." The tension in the air was palpable, but Wolfe was prepared. He had played this game before. Now, the final chapter of the mystery was about to unfold, and there was no turning back. Chapter 7. The Unraveling Truth. The back room of the auction house was dimly lit, casting long shadows across the old wooden floor. Nero Wolfe stood at the edge of the room, his posture unyielding, while the tension in the air grew thicker by the second. Lillian Caldwell had reluctantly agreed to follow him here, but Wolfe could tell she wasn't happy about it. The older man who had accompanied her, who Wolfe now recognized as one of Granger's business associates, had taken up a defensive stance in the corner, his eyes darting between Wolfe and Caldwell. It was clear they weren't just here for a simple exchange of pleasantries. "Mr. Wolfe," Caldwell began, her voice clipped with a mix of irritation and feigned calm. "I must insist you explain why you've brought me here. I have nothing to hide, and this is an unfortunate interruption to my work." Wolfe's gaze remained fixed on her, his eyes sharp as ever. "Miss Caldwell, you know as well as I do that there's more at stake here than your work. The necklace you so conveniently helped Juliette's mother acquire is part of a much larger conspiracy, one that involves far more than the art you claim to be protecting." Caldwell's lips tightened into a thin line, and she took a step toward him. "You have no idea what you're talking about. The Verdon family has no place in this conversation, and neither do you. I've worked for years to build a reputation in this industry, and I'm not about to let you ruin it over an accusation that holds no weight." Wolfe remained unmoved. "Reputation is fragile, Miss Caldwell. It can shatter in an instant. As for the Verdon family, you're far too invested in this secret collection for it to be just a coincidence. If Juliette were to discover the truth, your empire would crumble." At the mention of Juliette's name, Caldwell's demeanor shifted. For a fleeting moment her composure cracked, and the mask she had carefully constructed seemed to falter. Wolfe had seen it before, when people realized they were on the brink of being exposed. It was the look of someone caught in the act, struggling to maintain control. "I don't know what game you think you're playing," Caldwell snapped, "but Juliette will never know anything about it. Her mother, Eleanor, was too deeply involved in this world to ever let her daughter get close to the truth. That's why I've kept the collection hidden. It's safer this way, and Juliette's best interest is at stake." Wolfe took a slow step forward, his eyes narrowing. "You keep saying it's for her best interest, but the truth is, Miss Caldwell, you've been manipulating her just as you've manipulated everyone else involved in this collection. You say you're protecting Juliette, but in reality, you're trying to protect yourself. This collection isn't just a series of paintings and artifacts. It's a network of power, and you're at the center of it." Caldwell's expression faltered, but she quickly regained her composure, stepping back to put some distance between them. "You're wrong, Wolfe. Everything I've done to preserve the legacy of my family. The collection is meant to stay hidden, to remain untouched by the public. If the world knew about it, there would be too many people willing to steal it, to destroy it. It's worth more than anything you can imagine." Wolfe's lips curled into a thin smile. "I'm afraid your legacy is about to come to an end, Miss Caldwell. Your actions have brought us to the point of no return. I've seen this kind of manipulation before, and now it's time for the truth to come out. No more secrets, no more lies." Before Caldwell could respond, the man in the corner, a tall, imposing figure, shifted his weight. "I think you're both underestimating the situation," he said, his voice low. And Chapter 8. The Final Curtain. The tension in the air was palpable as Nero Wolfe and Archie Goodwin walked out of the auction house, the door clicking shut behind them. The brief confrontation with Lillian Caldwell had done little to ease the weight pressing down on Wolfe's mind. They had broken through her facade, but the truth was still elusive. The players in this game were far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined, and Wolfe knew that this was only the beginning. The stakes had risen, and now the time for subtlety had passed. As they made their way back to the brownstone, Wolfe's thoughts were consumed with what had transpired. Caldwell's involvement was just the surface. There were deeper forces at work here, people with far more to lose than she did. Whoever was pulling the strings behind the scenes had no intention of letting the truth come to light. Wolfe wasn't one to be intimidated, but even he recognized that exposing these secrets would be far from simple. "Archie," Wolfe said suddenly, breaking the silence that had settled between them as they walked, "you've been watching Juliette closely. What's your read on her? Do you believe she's as innocent as she seems?" Archie looked at Wolfe, his face thoughtful. I'd say Juliette is genuine enough. She's been in the dark about everything that's been going on, but I don't think she's as naive as she seems. She's more involved in this than she realizes, but it's clear she has no idea just how deep the rabbit hole goes. Wolfe nodded slowly, his mind already working through the next steps. I agree. She's caught in the middle of something much larger than herself. The collection, the artifacts, the threats. It's all been about control, but we've uncovered a critical piece of the puzzle. Now we need to finish what we started. The brownstone was quiet when they returned, but Wolfe wasted no time in settling into his chair. He pulled a stack of papers toward him, notes from his investigation, files from the auction house, and a series of photographs taken during the evening's events. He sifted through them quickly, his mind focused on the connections that still eluded him. There was one more person, one more clue that would tie everything together. "Archie, contact Detective Kramer," Wolfe said, his voice cutting through the stillness of the room. "It's time to bring the authorities into this." Archie hesitated, his eyes flicking to Wolfe. "Are you sure about this? You've been keeping this quiet for a reason. Bringing Kramer in could complicate things." Wolfe's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. "The time for secrecy is over. This case is far too dangerous for us to handle alone. Kramer may not be the most subtle man, but he has connections, and he'll know how to handle the people we're dealing with." Archie nodded, reaching for the phone. Wolfe leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. The final pieces were falling into place. He could feel it. The collection was more than just a series of stolen artifacts. It was a symbol of power, of influence, something that in the wrong hands could change the course of history. Whoever had been behind the plot to steal it, to keep it hidden, was far more dangerous than anyone could have guessed. Later that evening, Wolfe and Archie sat in their usual spots at the brownstone, waiting for Detective Kramer's arrival. The room was silent, except for the occasional rustle of paper as Wolfe reviewed the final details of the case. He had already connected the dots between Caldwell, Granger, and the missing artifacts. But there were still loose ends, ones that would need to be tied up before they could bring the full truth to light. When the doorbell rang, Wolfe stood up slowly, his large form moving with surprising grace. Archie answered the door, and Detective Kramer stepped into the room, his bulk filling the doorway. Kramer was a man of action, not subtlety, but Wolfe knew that he could be relied upon when things got complicated, and this case was certainly complicated. "Evening, Wolfe," Kramer grumbled, taking off his hat and settling into a chair. "You've been keeping me in the dark long enough. I hope you have something good for me tonight." Wolfe didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Kramer, I've been investigating a theft, but it's much more than that. It's a network of stolen artifacts, some of which are connected to a hidden collection that's been kept secret for decades." Kramer raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Artifacts? Hidden collection? Wolfe, this sounds like one of your usual cases, but I don't see how it adds up. What are we really dealing with here?" Wolfe leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "This isn't just a robbery, Kramer. It's about control over history, over influence. The collection involves priceless pieces that could change the course of research, politics, and wealth. Whoever controls it controls far more than just art." Kramer's face hardened. "And you think this is all tied to Juliette Verdon?" Wolfe nodded. "Juliette is an innocent pawn in a much larger game, but she's not the only one at risk. The people behind this scheme, Caldwell, Granger, and others, are not just interested in art. They are interested in power, and they'll do anything to keep it hidden." "So what's the next step?" Kramer asked, his expression more serious now. Wolfe didn't hesitate. "We need to gather the remaining pieces of the collection. We need to find the missing artifacts and bring them to the surface. But we also need to protect Juliette." She's been manipulated into this situation, and if we're not careful, she could become a target." "Target?" Kramer said, his voice growing grim. "You think they'll go after her?" Wolfe's face remained stoic. "They already have, and they won't stop until they've silenced her and anyone else who stands in their way." The following days were a blur of activity. Wolfe and Archie worked together to track down the remaining pieces of the collection, using their connections in the art world and Wolfe's unmatched skills in deduction. They visited auction houses, private galleries, and even the homes of influential collectors. Slowly, the pieces began to fall into place. Meanwhile, Detective Kramer worked his own angle, using his connections in the police force to bring pressure to bear on those who might have information. Wolfe had played the long game, but now, with the pieces of the collection in hand and the criminals on the run, the final confrontation was inevitable. When the day finally came to confront the remaining culprits, Wolfe was ready. He stood tall, his gaze fixed on the task at hand. The game was coming to a close, and no one, no matter how powerful, could stop him now. As Wolfe and Archie entered the darkened warehouse where the final pieces of the collection were being hidden, they knew it was only a matter of time before the truth would be exposed. The criminals, the lies, the power plays, it was all about to unravel. Wolfe had been patient, but now the final curtain was about to fall. "Let's get this over with," Wolfe muttered, his eyes locked on the dark figures standing in the shadows. "The truth is about to take center stage,"